This question is central theme of Better Call Saul's finale, Saul Gone. Walter White argues that time travel is a real and theoretical impossibility. Rather, it is the question of regrets. And he is right. I have just finished the finale and I am still trying to process the feeling of overwhelm. I just witnessed the perfect ending to a show that I have been following episode by episode for 7 years, and I feel content. Saul Gone has to be one of the best finales you would get to see. Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould have managed to end this story on such a great high. They have outdid themselves. You thought they could not recreate the magic of Breaking Bad's finale. I thought so too. I stand corrected and feel really glad that I was wrong. I mainly doubted it because of how they ruined the Jesse Pinkman arc with the subpar El Camino. Usually, shows like this would have a gunfight or an epic climax with action sequences or a grand main event. Something that they neatly pulled off in the Breaking Bad finale, Felina. But like I keep telling, Better Call Saul is thematically similar to Breaking Bad, but way different in its approach. It was more of a lawyer story who got mixed up with drug lords and fucked up. It only made sense that the finale would be a courtroom drama special. This decision would have been a tough one for the writers and the makers to go forward with, but boy, did they pull it off with ease. Let me address the most notable aspect of this episode that breaks the illusion for the audience. This is a Breaking Bad parallel that I never saw coming. A feeling that we experienced in Breaking Bad's last episode too, when Walter confesses to Skyler that he did everything for himself. He did it all because he liked it and felt alive. He only fooled himself and the audience into believing that he did it for the family. I still remember the feeling of betrayal when I watched that scene. Breaking Bad had this anti-hero theme that we were still rooting for Walter even after seeing him do all that bad shit. But that scene broke our illusion altogether. Similarly, we had grown to love Jimmy McGill in 7 years. We empathized with him thinking that society made him into Saul Goodman. But Jimmy's time machine conversation on 2 instances with Mike and Walter breaks the wall for us. Mike and Walter's answers are reflective of them being regretful of the way things have turned out for them. Saul's answers at both the instances signify that he has always been like this. He does not regret a thing. The story and we as audience finally see Jimmy for who he really is. It is not something external that has turned him into Saul. He was always like this. He was always Saul. His brother Chuck understood that from the very beginning, which was also the reason for his concern all along. We as audience realize that the foundation of the show was an illusion in itself. The entire show was built upon the idea of how James McGill turned into this conman lawyer Saul Goodman, but turns out it was him all along. It wasn't his alter ego or anything. Saul Goodman or Jimmy McGill has to be one of the most layered characters I have seen in the history of storytelling. Even Heisenberg was clearly distinguished as a negative character in moments of desperation. But with Saul, it has been really hard to see him in negative light completely throughout the show. You feel he was dragged into the situation unintentionally, but you also somewhere know that he had a choice. But you are not sure because Jimmy looks vulnerable at times. With Saul, I could never tell if he was doing it out of choice or he was cornered into doing it. Saul is intelligent and cheeky enough to get his sentence reduced to 7 years from 30 years as recommended by the district attorney. He just has to appear in the court once to get the judge's approval, which is more or less a formality at this stage. Then comes the final courtroom act. Saul walks into the court with his colorful suit and tie. You can tell even when the screenplay is still in black and white. He sits down in the defendant's chair and says to himself, "It's showtime." That is when you know he's gonna go off the script and put on a show. He starts confessing to the judge that he was more than a willing participant in everything Walter White did. You think that he is trying to come clean at all fronts, but in between of his speech, he starts bragging about how there would have been no Walter White without him, that he was indispensable and kept Walter out of jail. There's a sense of accomplishment that he's trying to bring out to everyone present in the room. He exchanges looks with Kim and realizes he wants to say one more thing. He talks about Howard's death and chokes. He talks about how he lacks the guts to start over like Kim. This also reminds him of his brother Chuck and his death, and how it could have been his fault indirectly, how he could have tried harder to do better. This final courtroom scene shows that he has not addressed all these issues for years, and today he is using this platform to introspect and seek redemption. He has been running for years. Now he wants to stop and accept the consequences of his actions, or he will never be free. After his confession, he walks back to his seat. The judge asks, "Mr. Goodman, sit down and stay seated." In response, he says, "The name's McGill. I am James McGill." Cut to a flashback scene between Jimmy and Chuck. They are back in Chuck's house as Chuck wants to have a conversation about Jimmy's clients. Jimmy does not want to talk about it as he thinks Chuck might start nitpicking on his methods again. Chuck says, "If you don't like where you are going, there's no shame in going back and changing your path." They argue and Jimmy walks out of the house. Then you get a brief glance at the book Chuck has on the table, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. The placement of this scene right after the trial signifies volumes. It is a message that Jimmy is finally listening to Chuck's advice and moving down the acceptance path. He has finally decided to rise out of shame and change his path. He is shedding off Saul Goodman's skin that he had started wearing as an effect of the unstoppable inertia effect. He cannot go back to the past but wants to make amends. He is finally redeeming himself. Cut to Jimmy and other criminals are on a bus being transported to the prison facility. The prisoners identify him as Better Call Saul. He denies and tells them he is James McGill, but it does not matter to them. He is still Saul to them. The prisoners start chanting Better Call Saul in unison. This suggests that even though he has left that identity behind, the world still looks at him as Saul. Jimmy has a slight smile by the end of that scene that can be interpreted as him feeling proud of his work. But the smile also has a sense of freedom that comes with the acknowledgement of helplessness of not having much control on the external factors.
You talking to me? Then who the hell else are you talking? You talking to me?
Jimmy is now sentenced to 86 years of imprisonment. He could have served 7 years and got out had he stuck to the original plan. But Kim's approval was more important than the reduced sentencing for him at this point. He could have been free in 7 years, but would still be alone. Kim has been the only one who had given Jimmy a chance through and through. So keeping her close and winning her trust back was his true freedom. The way I see it is Saul Goodman was this evil Superman who had gone rogue and had lost control over his powers. And Kim was his Lois Lane, the key to his sanity, redemption and freedom. The ending is so poetic that every time I watch it again, I will find new meaning, a new interpretation of a particular scene. That is the kind of impact BCS has created. Bob Odenkirk is one of the best actors out there who is gifted with such nuanced expressions and body language. Thank you Vince Gilligan, Peter Gould, Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad for providing such awesome and wholesome stories. This universe is a clear standout from everything we have seen on television or even on the big screen. This show is not popular as it should be, but I guess that is the price to pay for a show of such a high standard that will stay on for years and ages like fine wine. Goodbye.